Oh, don't think I didn't notice that Star Trek Discovery added a cone of silence to the captain's chair. Long overdue, in my opinion. Long overdue. So many private conversations happening in the captain's chair all the time. They needed this. They needed this. Hello, interwebs. I hope you're doing well because it is my favorite time of week to review yet another episode of Star Trek. This time, Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episode 2, Anomaly, Anomaly, Anomaly. I don't know what I was going for there, but hopefully it was funny for you. But regardless, for those of you who are new to the channel, just so you know how this is structured, I give my spoiler-free thoughts of an episode up front. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, you're all good. You'll just get my impressions. I won't spoil anything specific for you. And then I'll have an ad break, and then we'll go full into spoilers, and I'll give a warning of when we get into that. So you'll know exactly when to jump ship if you haven't seen the episode yet. But hopefully you'll stick with me and join me nerding out about my favorite franchise for a little bit. But spoiler-free thoughts, I really enjoyed this episode because, especially coming off of the season premiere, this season so far, and it's only 2 episodes in, but so far this season has proved to me that this show is starting to find its voice a little bit more in terms of its pacing, its tone, and its level of intensity. Because one of the major criticisms of Star Trek Discovery, and I've liked Star Trek Discovery this entire way through, but one of the things that it tends to be is it tends to ratchet it up to 10 and stay at a 10, maybe going down to a 9 here or there, but mostly staying at those high level of stakes. But what I loved about this episode, and also in the season premiere, was that while, this is in the title, so it's kind of not really giving it away, while this episode was about dealing with the anomaly, the sort of big stakes, the big threat of the season, this episode really felt like it was much slower paced, sadder in tone, especially coming off of the darkness that was the end of last episode with Book and his planet getting destroyed. But it kind of stayed there, and while there are moments of heightened action, heightened tension that were a lot of fun in that sort of Star Trek Discovery, blockbuster, movie on a TV screen sort of way, it never felt so over the top and high stakes drama as sometimes Star Trek Discovery, and really Star Trek in this sort of modern era of the franchise, has tended to go. And again, this is saying that as someone who likes that sort of stuff, but I do tend to find that you need to have a little bit more of the moments in between that. And I think this show is starting to find its voice in finding those moments. I think especially this episode, there were some really great pairings and moments between characters that really felt like they were just conversations and really delving into these characters in really meaningful and emotional ways, and in ways that felt smaller scale despite the high stakes of the discussions and things going on. I'm thinking particularly some of the pairings that I really loved were Stamets and Book, which is a pairing I never would have thought but worked surprisingly well for me. There's also some really great moments between Adira and Gray and pushing that forward in my little LGBTQ trans queer heart, just all the things, all the gay things I'll just identify as. It just made me very, very happy, and I thought there's some really good moments that called out to the LGBTQ community and the trans community specifically that I really resonated with, and it was just small things that I really appreciated and I liked seeing here. But even beyond that, I also liked Saru, just always coming in with some great advice just as a captain. So this episode just really proved to me that it was able to handle that variations of tone a little bit better than Discovery has in seasons prior, and I'm really appreciating that. Overall too, the season also pushed forward this big mystery of the season, and while I do have some concerns with some of the stuff that we saw in the last few minutes of the episode that I'll talk about more in spoilers, within this episode I liked how it was pushing forward the big mystery of the season in ways that got me invested and interested in it, and didn't feel like it was this mystery box crazy thing, but it was oh, we have a situation that we're dealing with now, and Starfleet officers are going to go in and competently deal with it. And I like seeing the Starfleet going and doing its Starfleet thing with the Discovery crew, and I thought that was just really, really cool to see. And the last thing that I want to mention in my spoiler-free thoughts was I also just really loved that this whole episode, again, while dealing with this big threat of the season, was more about moments of characters recognizing each other, connecting with each other. And because this is Star Trek Discovery and everyone's just got to have trauma all the time, because literally every character in this series has trauma and PTSD of some sort, but very much this episode was dealing with some characters' PTSD and having characters reach out and connect with each other and find each other within that. And that really is the theme of Star Trek Discovery as a whole. But this finding connection and finding each other is just an earnest Star Trekian thing that I really love Discovery exploring, and I'm really enjoying how this episode in particular did that between its characters in smaller scale ways rather than big, grand thematic sweeps that Discovery is sometimes known for. So at the end of the day, I love this episode, and while I have some concerns that I'll talk about in the spoiler-filled section, I think this is a good indication that Discovery is really finding its own confidence and voice in what it wants to say with both its themes and its tones and its ability to have variation within that. That doesn't mean that it always has to be up at a 10, and I'm really appreciating that this season. But those are my spoiler-free thoughts, so we're going to get into spoilers right after this ad break. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, watch the ad because Jessie needs to pay her bills, and then come back afterwards and enjoy the spoiler discussion because we're going to recap the episode in full in just a moment. However, before we get much further, it's time to quick talk about my sponsor for the rest of my Star Trek reviews this year, The Geek Fight. The Geek Fight is a non-profit online store that fights for a diverse future, and they have two goals. Number one, create an easy way to learn about human rights thanks to their Lightbrary, a digital library with light content. Over there you can find the stories of people fighting for human rights like the amazing Marsha P. Johnson, learn about how we can abolish and rethink policing, and find movies that represent disabilities beyond stereotypes, and even more. And number two, they hope to raise money for social causes. They have t-shirts, pillows, prints, etc. with human rights and geek designs, combining the best of both worlds. For example, I have this adorable bag which has this wonderful little trans badger on it. It's absolutely adorable, and all the money for things like this go to organizations like the Human Rights Campaign, which is an LGBTQ organization fighting for LGBTQ rights. So please go check out the Geek Fight. It's a wonderful place. You get to get yourself cool knowledge and cool nerdy stuff, and also support really cool stuff doing really great work. So please go check out the Geek Fight, and if you want 15% off all of your orders, use the promo code Jessie at checkout to get yourself that 15% off that I just mentioned. So thank you so much to the Geek Fight, and let's get back to the review. All right, now that all those I was going to say nerds, but they haven't seen the episode yet, so I guess they're not nerds. They're not super nerds like us. So because all of those super nerds aren't here yet, let's get into spoilers. Let's just talk about spoilers. I had a whole joke thing. It didn't work. Let's go on. So the episode starts off where every Star Trek Discovery episode has to start off with a character feeling trauma, this time with Book watching essentially Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, but really just going through the footage of his planet, and you can clearly see that Book is very much dealing with the trauma and PTSD of his home planet being destroyed, which fair. Very fair. And I liked Burnham coming in and trying to be with him, but him just saying, like, I just need you to go. I thought that rang very, very truthful. I mean, I don't know how I would handle my entire planet being destroyed. But then we have what I'm going to call a Saruunion with Saru and Burnham after, 9 months being apart. And I liked, again, Saru just is the constant, great advice giver. He just always has this calm, caring, and just, nailing, his advice every single time that we see him in the show. And I like that he pointed out to Burnham that while Book was obsessing over the death of his planet and was sort of dealing with his trauma in his own way, Burnham was also obsessing over the deaths of the people on the station last episode and sort of her handling of the situation, especially after her conversation with the president, that she focuses on trying to save everybody, which I'm sure is going to be her character arc going forward in the season. I like that Saru's just sort of like poking at the heart of that problem with her obsession with wanting to save everybody. But then we also got this moment after that where Saru said that he's not coming back to take the captain's chair, even though he was offered the captaincy of a different ship, but he's coming back to be Burnham's number one, which Star Trek in general has always been wonky with its promotions. I mean, poor Ensign Kim stayed an ensign forever, but this series in particular with Tilly being promoted to first officer and now Saru being demoted to first officer, but willingly, it just very much, you feel like a little bit of the hand of the writers being like, we want Burnham to be captain, but we also want Saru here, so we're gonna have him be number one again, even though that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so I'm just sort of like, fair, if this is the dynamic you want to go into it just feels a little bit forced to get us there, but it is what it is, and hopefully I was really hoping to see Saru get to be like a counselor or an ambassador or an admiral going forward, and that might still be in the cards, but you can definitely feel a little bit of the hand of the writers in this moment being like, all right, Saru's gonna be first officer, just don't worry about it. But then we get the Discovery crew meeting with Starfleet headquarters and the president, and we get this explanation that the anomaly that destroyed Book's home planet is a 5 light-year wide thing, and they don't really know what it is. They think it might be a black holes or moving black holes, but they're not entirely sure. And so everyone's starting to worry about getting people evacuated. Saru makes a good point about this is a very fragile time, so there might be civil unrest, as the Navari or Vulcan president points out, which I'm curious to see. I really hope we get to see some of the politics of that, of people being we just thought that we finally had some stability. We were getting dilithium back, but now everything's falling apart again. And so I'd be curious to see sort of like the establishment of like how strong the Federation Union is, how strong the Federation government is, and sort of the darker parts of that, and hopefully discussion of that when it comes to things like civil unrest in the face of big moments like a giant anomaly coming around and destroying everything. So I think that can be some really prescient political allegory within that, and I'm curious to see how they're going to develop that. But I liked also seeing the Navari president here, because I hope she gets to have some more sexual tension with Saru, because those two, they had something last season. I really hope we get to see more of that this season with the two of them. Then we get a small little Saru and Tilly moment where, again, Saru always has the best advice in the world, but Tilly is clearly like a little bit off after the events of last episode and her sort of dealing with the station, or actually even beyond that, as we see at the end of the episode. But Saru just says we need to make most of every single moment in our lives, and I'm like, I feel that Saru very hard. The guy just great with advice. Then we go to our next scene, and I don't know why, but in my notes I put dum music. I guess there must have been like some epic music at this moment that I just noted in my notes. So there you go. But they jump to the anomaly, and it goes without saying at this point that Star Trek Discovery looks beautiful, but I really like the look of the, like, when they turn on the spectrometer, the polarized thing, to see the anomaly, and it just like had this like 3D effect through the view screen that I thought just genuinely looked cool. So that was nice to see. But I also like seeing that Stamets teleported onto the bridge, a cool little sound effect to indicate that that no one needs turbo lifts anymore. If we can get rid of those like endless turbo lift shafts that go on for like ever, like a Doctor Who TARDIS inside the middle of Discovery. So we can just teleport around now, fill those with more cetacean ops in there. But regardless, they realize that they need to go into the anomaly in order to detect it, and Book offers up his ship. He says, I can pilot it, I can go in and do this. And then Book and Burnham go off into the other room and have a really wonderfully done scene between Book and Burnham. I thought the actors did, Sonequa Martin Green and David Ajala played this wonderfully, where Book's just like, I need to do this, I want to go do this, and Burnham sort of like trying to be understanding, trying to be like, I trust you, but also I know how can you not be affected by this? And I thought they both played it really, really well, and Book's like, I'm gonna go, you can't control me, so either you're gonna have to arrest me or you're gonna have to blow me out of the sky, which I know you're not gonna do. And sort of putting Burnham in between a rock and a anomaly, I guess. I was gonna say hard place, but anomaly seems to make much more sense in this case. So from there we go to an interesting scene with Gray, Adira, and Culber, and I say interesting for quite a few reasons, and I might actually spend a few moments on this scene in particular because I have a lot of things to say about it. But first, let's go with the nerdy thing, because Culber is essentially working with Adira and Gray to build a new body for Gray, and we'll set aside the I don't know what the heck space magic is going on with Gray to bring him back in any case, and how that even works. But regardless of that, we have a body here. And the first thing is they call this out, they give a call out to Star Trek Picard Season 1 with the synth bodies and the golem body that Picard downloaded into at the end of that season that a lot of fans were complaining about because it's like, well, you just kind of solved mortality. Why isn't everybody just going into a synth body here? And so they at least give a call out and like kind of lamp shading, I guess would be the right word, or a plot fixing of this, where we learn that after the end of Picard, people tried to download themselves into those synth bodies, but it didn't really work. And so people just sort of set it aside. Again, that feels very much like the show being like, don't worry about it. We're going to fix some of Star Trek Picard's mistakes here, because I have many thoughts about that golem body, but I like seeing them tying together and working together here to tell a story across both series. I just really like the interconnectedness of both shows, even though they're across many different eras here. But you can clearly tell that was a bit of a like we're just gonna paper over that issue here. But then we also get some really warm scenes between the three of them. Again, I love the found family between Adira, Gray, and Culber. As a queer person, the found family bit of these characters and the fact that they are all part of the LGBTQ community just really speaks to me, and I deeply enjoyed that quite heavily. And I love Culber just getting to be the warm, caring dad and giving advice to Gray about being like, it's okay to be happy even in these really hard, dark times. It's okay to be excited about getting a body again. And Adira and Gray just having wonderful back and forth, and Adira, they're just like making fun of Gray the entire time in very sweet and wonderful ways. The dynamic felt very human and very real to me, and I really enjoyed that. And also I should mention, it would be a little remiss of me if I didn't mention the fact that we got a nice little small reference to gender transition through the character of Gray. He makes a reference to like, I was always thinking about my transition before, I became a host. And while that may be a reference to the fact that he transitioned to being a host, I do think that that is a confirmation that the character is indeed a trans man, because we know Alexander is also transgender, and we heard from outside sources that the character was transgender, but I don't think we ever got an actual confirmation within the series itself that he was trans. And so I just like that little casual reference to the fact that like he had a transition. It's no big deal. No one really cares about it. It's just part of his life that he mentions offhandedly, as I do. Like, I had a transition too as a trans person, and I tend not to ignore. I just, when it comes up in conversation, like, oh yeah, that was back when I was transitioning. And I just like the casualness of it here, in reference to the fact that he's building a new body. Again, that kind of relates to a trans experience as well. So I thought that just the casualness of it was really nice to see, and that's more what I like to see with gender and transition and stuff like that within the Star Trekking world, that it's just sort of a thing that people do in their lives, and it's not a big deal, and no one cares, but it's just something that's part of your life and you bring it up. So I thought that was very, very sweet. But then we get a nice little scene between Saru and Burnham. Burnham's apparently put a holodeck in her room, which, awesome. I would totally do that myself. I would be sleeping in like some paradise every single night if I could have a holodeck in my room. But it was cool to sort of see like the integration of that technology and the holodeck technology into Discovery. But I also liked that Saru, again, here with the great advice as well, sort of saying like, sometimes you just need to set aside the captain in these moments to really think about like, what does Book need, and can you trust him? And Saru says, give him a go. I think we can have him try this. Also, we get a reference to the fact that Discovery is calling herself Zora now, which, again, referencing to the Calypso, the short trek, and stuff that happened last season. I was getting a bit concerned because at the end of last season, we did have the confirmation that Star Trek Discovery, the ship Discovery, was becoming sentient, and kind of seemed to be ignored at the beginning of the season, so I like that, at least a little acknowledgement here. Then we go to engineering. We have a moment between Burnham and Stamets, and it's the awkward moment with Stamets, you might as well blow me out in airlock, referencing, of course, the end of last season. I was wondering if there was going to be some lingering tension between these two. I thought it was going to be much more pronounced, but I guess it's just awkward moments between the two, which is a bit disappointing because I would have liked a little bit more follow-through on that, but the awkwardness was palpable in that scene, let's just say, and it makes sense to me that Stamets, having no scruples whatsoever, would say that. But then we learned that they're going to let Book go out, but they're going to use programmable matter as like a tether to like hold him to Discovery, which I thought was a cool idea. But then we get a really wonderful moment between Stamets and Culber, where Culber gives advice to Stamets on how to handle Book. I mean, grief is grief, he says, and Book's dealing with a lot, and just sort of like be there for him and let him guide you, and I enjoyed that moment. Also, worth noting, because at the end of the episode, Tilly says that she wants to have a session with Culber, like a counseling session, and yeah, Culber has essentially been working as the ship's counselor since last season, but when did that promotion or like side promotion or career change actually happen? Because I don't think there was any moment where it was just like, oh, Culber's the counselor now. He just seemed to be a doctor through most of season 1 and 2, and now he's just the counselor, which again, I'm here for. I think Wilson Cruz plays that element of the character really well. It's just weird that people are like, yeah, I'll get appointments with you now. And there's like no actual acknowledgement of the fact that like, I guess he's officially the ship's counselor now. But then we have Stamets over on Book's ship. I thought this was a funny little scene. There's some good moments with like Grudge not being able to smell hollows and not liking hollows. I understand that. Cats would totally be that way, and Grudge is a queen. She knows what she wants. And also just the awkward communication between Book and Stamets, and Book just clearly being like, I don't give a crap. Like, my family died and we're not really close friends. And I like Stamets trying to reach out to him, but it not really working. But then we get into the action of it all with Book's ship going into the anomaly, but then Discovery starting to get anomaly waves that they weren't expecting. And I thought the way they showed that was really cool. The like 0G, like all the characters floating up in the air, must have been a really cool day on set to have everyone floating around. I thought it looked cool. My only thing was like Burnham had her arms like floating like this, and I'm like, I don't think in 0G your arms would be like you're swimming in a pool. but regardless, the effect looked really cool overall. Though people were slamming down hard. I think at 1.00 had like blood in her mouth, and I'm like, dang, these people are taking a beating. I hope they're all okay. But eventually Adira and Tilly work out how to time the different waves, and also we get moments where Tilly's like kind of snapping at Adira, and then Culber coming over and sort of saying Tilly's like, Adira's just trying to impress you, right? And I like that little moment of Tilly sort of like recognizing like, oh, I see where this is at, especially after like clearly Adira is taking over Tilly's role on the ship, and I liked the sort of Tilly recognizing that. But then, as I said, Tilly and Adira work out the waves of the ship hitting it, and so they realize Discovery has to back off. They back off the ship, but Book is sort of now left out there on his own without the tether. And again, we just have these good moments between Stamets and Book, and I like the moment where Stamets says, like, every time I see you, I see my helplessness and my inability to save my family, calling back to last season where, you know, he was jettisoned off the ship in the airlock and he couldn't do anything to save his family, and Book was ultimately the one who helped save them all. And I like that that was how he was able to connect with Book, who also feels that survivor's guilt, that he couldn't save his family. And I thought that that was just a nice way for those two men to connect in that moment. But obviously Book is having a little bit of an over-the-top PTSD moment. This moment led a little bit too much to me, where Book sort of like has a complete like breakdown and just starts seeing his nephew. It was a bit over the top, but it got a nice moment where we got the cone of silence on the captain's chair with Burnham reaching out to Book and sort of talking him down and getting him to trust her that they can get the ship out of there. I thought that moment, the writing of that moment was really, really good. I just thought like Book's like vision of his nephew was a bit over the top, and him's like complete disassociation from everything was a bit much. But overall, I thought the moment rang true, if a little bit on the dialing up too much meter for me. But they're able to get Book out by riding the waves, which by the way was great advice by Bryce. It's cool to see Bryce actually having some moments to shine here. I really love it whenever the characters on the bridge get moments to shine, and Bryce really hasn't had a lot of time to do that, so it's cool to have him be like, I'm gonna step in and be like, I ride waves, I like to surf, it's kind of fun, and then walking out and being like, I did a good thing today. I thought it was really nice. I just like seeing more of Bryce and really all of them, like Owo, Detmer, and all of them. But then Book and Stamets make it out, and I like, again, Book reaching out to Stamets and saying, yeah, I do get the arm tinglies on the spore drive, which is a nice sort of funny moment, but him sort of recognizing that they do have a lot more in common, that they can be friends. I thought that that was a good pairing, and honestly, one of the strongest emotional cores for the episode for me. I just liked seeing their arc through this episode, and it was not a pairing that I would have initially even thought of. So kudos to their episode writers for really nailing that. But then we get a few little interesting wrap-out scenes here. We get one with Tilly and Culber, where again Culber is working as the ship's counselor, even though I don't know when that happened, and Tilly saying that there's something more going on with her. So I'm curious to see where they're going with her character arc for the rest of the season with her, because she has been made a kind of a little bit redundant on the ship, because Adira's kind of taken over her role. Tilly's not the first officer now, like she was at the end of last season, so I feel like they're trying to figure out what they want to do with Tilly, and I'm curious to see where they're going to have her eventually land in the next few episodes or the rest of the season. Then we get another small moment with Adira and Gray, and again, I like Dira talking about their PTSD after last episode, because everyone, again, on Star Trek Discovery has trauma. I don't know why I made that into a song, but there you go. But it was a nice little moment between the two of those characters, and I'm curious. I just really love those two. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I like seeing two, you know, queer characters feeling really human, and just I like their moments together. Just I really, really enjoyed. Also, speaking of human moments, I also liked where Culber and Tilly had like a moment in the hallway at the end of the last scene where Tilly's like, I'm gonna go save the world or whatever. It was just like the joking between the two of them felt very real, felt very improv. I'm sure the actors were just having fun on set, and I feel the same sort of humanness between Adira and Gray. I think that their relationship just really works for me on a very human level. And we also get a scene with Book and Burnham. Again, Book very much feeling survivor's guilt, and Burnham saying that, you know, I appreciate you trusting me. I love the chemistry between these two as well, and I like that Burnham was just there to be supportive of his grief and the things that he's going through and understanding, and it wasn't like a big fight or anything, but it was just like a nice moment where she just acknowledged that he's going through a lot and he's dealing with survivor's guilt and it's not his fault. But then we come to the last scene of the episode, which is where my biggest concerns come in, which is we learn that from Tilly that the anomaly actually changed direction in the middle of Discovery probing it, and now they can't predict where this anomaly is going to go, which is very concerning. And as we pull back, we realize that the whole galaxy is at stake. We see the anomaly is about to destroy a bunch of planets and stars and all that stuff, and it's all very, very scary, which I'm a little bit concerned here because, as I said last episode in my review, I really don't want this to be a mystery box thing with, like, the indication that it's able to move has me worried that someone's controlling it, that someone made it, that there's some dastardly plan behind the anomaly, which I don't want that to be the case. And also, I don't need every season of Star Trek to have a galaxy-ending threat. I am hoping that this, like, we can't predict it, just adds a little bit of unpredictability to the anomaly, and that it's not being controlled by anybody, which will lead to more, like, that stuff that I was talking about towards the beginning of this review, the civil unrest, the politics of all of this. I really hope that that's what they're trying to lean into, the politics of this problem, and not leaning into the mystery box, oh, there's going to be a dastardly villain, dastardly plan behind all of this, because I really don't need Star Trek. I'm fine with galaxy-ending stakes every once in a while, but when it's every single season, and when there's always a mystery box around it, which can always make the season feel really worse at the end of it if the mystery box doesn't pay off, which it usually doesn't in most of the cases, I just really hope they don't go down that route. So they haven't gotten to the part where I'm like, oh, this is bad yet, but that last like minute or two of the episode, I was like, ugh, concerns. I have concerns. Right at the end there. So we'll keep an eye on it. It's not to the point of like, I'm down on it yet. I just have concerns. So we'll see how that goes going forward. But that is my review for this episode. Like I said, other than my like concerns for the season going forward, I thought this episode was, despite the like big stakes of some of the moments, felt very more toned back, very small stakes, had some really great character interactions and really great character moments in a true earnestly Star Trekian way, and I really just enjoyed that quite heavily. So that's my review for Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episode 2, Anomaly. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Don't forget I have a Patreon where you can help supporting me doing what I do and doing these recaps. But beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper.